Chris Lansing.
Oh, thank you. I'm grateful for the opportunity I have of coming today and being with you. I would be interested to get a better understanding of who I'm looking at. And so let me ask you a couple questions, and then I'll turn the tables, and then you can ask me any questions you want. And hopefully by the time that we've finished, we'll both have a pretty good idea of each other, and we will both be improved for it. So, just out of curiosity, how many of you are native Hawaiians here from the island of Hawaii? A few, not too many. How many are from east of here, meaning the continental U.S., and live there permanently? More of you. How many west of here, in Asia and the South Seas? Kind of a smattering. How many of you are married? How many of you are returned missionaries? Wow, quite a few. Is there anybody that hasn't raised their hand that would like to identify themselves and tell me what they are? I'm delighted to be here. My name is Chris Lansing. I live in Richmond, Virginia, which is not that far from Washington, D.C., if that would be helpful to you. Richmond is the capital of Virginia, but as some of you know, that about 150 years ago, it was the capital of the Confederacy, back in the old North and South days. And I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, from being born there to this day. And so I tell people like yourself that I've lived in Richmond so long that, and grew up there, that I was a senior in high school before I found out that the South lost the war. Just part of being in, living in the South and growing up there, that gives you maybe a little bit different perspective. I know your perspectives are different than mine because you come from what I can tell is the four corners of the world. And I think that is significant. What I thought I would do today was, rather than give you a straight presentation, a PowerPoint with bullets, which I've done in the past, I wanted to try something different. I wanted to take most of the time and give you an opportunity to ask questions. As I've had an opportunity to work with some of the brethren, I see increasingly that the members of the 12 in training and other times that are not formal, like in a conference session, will stand up and ask for questions. Now, I recognize I'm not a general authority, but I do recognize also that maybe there's something that I have that would be helpful to you. Maybe there's an experience or something that's going on in your head now that might be a question for you in regards to the future, in regards to business. And so maybe as we go through this exercise and you ask some questions, I'll give you a little bit of background to begin with, and I even have some suggested questions. The only thing about the suggested questions, one of the suggestion questions is the Jim Ritchie story. And we're going to save that one for near the last, if you'll remind me, because that's one of the good ones. And, but I would ask you to ask some questions and think about it in terms of your own perspective. In other words, everybody is different. Everybody's coming from a different background. We're together today, and at some point in time, we'll all scatter. So you have in your heads what your background is and what your goals in life are. Maybe as we talk today, we can talk about principles through experiences that I've had that are principles that would be helpful to you as you contemplate your future life. Does that make sense to you? So I would ask you to think of some questions that might be meaningful that can help trigger in your mind or someone else's mind principles that might be of some help. Let me give you a little bit of background about our little business and my background, and maybe that would give you a platform, so to speak, for questions that you might have. My parents, I grew up, as I mentioned, on the East Coast of the United States. My parents were converts to the church. 2 missionaries tracting in February at night in the rain, and there was a knock at the door. And my mother answered the door, and they identified themselves as missionaries. She wasn't the least bit interested in that, but she was concerned that there were 2 young men out in the rain in February, probably catching cold. So she invited them in and said, "Sit down and get out of the rain and let me give you a cup of coffee," or something like that. That was how it started in our home. They were not searching for something, it just happened. And they befriended the missionaries, got to know them, the missionaries started teaching them the gospel, and they joined the church. And because of that, it had a lot to do with the beginning of our business. They stayed in Virginia. They joined the church and stayed in Virginia and were some of the early pioneers of the church in Virginia, just like you are in the areas of the country that you come from. What I'm trying to say is, I don't have a Wasatch Front background myself, come from the mission field. I was the only one in my school, along with my siblings, that were members of the church. I thought that was great, and I'm glad that my children have had a similar experience. But we grew up there, and our business was started. Interesting, you might think, after they joined the church, my parents wanted to move to Salt Lake, and my dad to Mecca, to Zion. My dad had an opportunity to take a job in Salt Lake. He was selling roofing to lumber yards. His biggest customer, where we lived, went out of business. His company said, "Ted," his name was Ted, "if you will open up a roofing supply business in Virginia, we'll give you a line of credit and you can be in business for yourself." So, do I move to Salt Lake City, or do I start a business on a wing and a prayer, is what it amounted to. And he and my mother determined through prayer that they felt the Lord wanted them to stay in Virginia. And so our company was born in 1955, not because he was this fabulous entrepreneur. It was because he felt the Lord wanted him to stay and help strengthen the church in Little Richmond, Virginia. We were in the Washington, D.C. stake. J. Willard Marriott Jr. was Sr. was our stake president. That's how long ago that. Little branch in Richmond, Virginia. Well, the business started there. I grew up in the business. As a little kid, we talked about it around the dinner table. It was a family business. We helped out. We used to tote roofing out in the warehouse and carry roofing up to the roof on a job. By the way, that's why I went to college, is I didn't want to have to carry roofing all of my life and put it on the top of roofs. But as little business grew, I always wanted to be in it. I don't know why. I always thought it was fascinating. Maybe I didn't know any better. But I had an opportunity after graduating from BYU and serving 2 years in England to get into the business. That was 1974. Shortly after that, my dad got Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, horrible disease. He passed away in 1980. I was the only one in the family in the business. I probably wasn't very well prepared, but that's the way it was. And so that's how I started my career in the business. It's been 31 years now that I have been president of the business, and 29 years since my wife and I bought the stock from my family. He started it as one little warehouse in Richmond, and when he died, we had 6 warehouses. Today, we have 66 warehouses. We do business in 30 states, from Florida up through Seattle, Washington, and we still sell specialty building products to the professional contractor. That's what we do. There's not a lot of glamour in it. We buy in truckloads, we sell in job lots. We don't have any secret technology. We don't have a special sauce. It is a very straightforward, difficult business. Bottom line margins are typically between 1% and 3% on sales. Prior to the recession or depression in our business, we did about $350 million in sales. This year, we hope to be back to 250. We had gotten the number of branches up to 76. We've closed 12 and opened 2. So it's been a very difficult time the last 2 or 3 years, and continues to be challenging in home construction. If you think that 3 years ago, the run rate, in other words, the number of new homes built in the U.S. was about 2 million, and that in 2009, that number went down from 2 million to 500,000, 75%. Our sales went from 350 to just over $200 million. That is difficult, difficult, difficult. We felt a little bit like a hot air balloon careening towards a cliff, and we're throwing things out as quickly as we can in hopes of getting over the cliff. Early on, it wasn't too bad because there were programs and things that we did that were fairly easy to take care of. But when you have to take your head count from about 850 to just over 500 people, that becomes very difficult. We took no pride in having to do that or to close the number of branches. It's something you have to do. We enjoyed a nice ride on the way up, and that was very good, and I hope it returns. But in order to be a good manager, you've got to be able to manage up, and you got to be able to manage down. And so as this balloon is careening towards the cliff, you're throwing things off that you desperately wish that you didn't have to, because you know you'll need them at some point in the future. On the other hand, you won't have a future unless you do throw them out. So a dichotomy in management, you have to make those tough decisions. And so that's what we've done. Housing will continue to be bad, we think, for the next couple of years. By the way, the reason that unemployment is so high, to a great extent, is because housing hasn't come back. Housing is huge for employment. The people that make the carpets, the people that build the houses, the people that put on roofing, the people that underwrite the mortgages and the banking and so forth. I don't think that unemployment's going to come back to a manageable, satisfactory number until housing figures out what it's going to do. We don't see that anywhere in sight. It will incrementally get better, but very, very slowly. And so, even though the economy in general is improving, we have to run our business very, very, very tight, because remember, it's a 1% to 3% margin business. There's not a lot of slack in there. We're not Microsoft. It's a tough business. So, at any rate, that's a little bit of the background of where we've been.
If you were a young entrepreneur today, what kind of a business would you build? In other words, would you stick with the same kind of a business, or would you move toward some other type of business? Business you pointed out has changed dramatically
It has.
in the last few years. Do you have any advice on
I think I would follow where your expertise is. Where, A, there's a niche that you can fill, whatever it is, and two, what's your hot button? Do you feel like you have that you're competent in a particular area? For me, at my age, you know, I'm kind of a one-trick pony now, and there's not a whole lot I can do. In fact, my wife used to say, I hope nothing happens to this business because I know there's nothing else you can do. But for you that are young, I would look for something that's a growth business that you can see down the road is going to continue to grow. For instance, within the housing segment, the big thing that I read about is greenhouses now. Not greenhouses like you grow flowers in, but meaning green, energy efficient homes. So that might be something that you would develop an expertise in. Yeah.
Seems to me the market always changes. That's the one thing you can count on, is that it always does. And I know that over the 30-some odd years you've been in business, it's never changed like this time, but you've had to respond to this many times.
Sure.
Okay. So
you've got to be flexible and on your toes. For instance, 20 years ago, we had some of the first trucks that took roofing on a conveyor belt and put it on a roof. That wasn't done before. When I was a young guy, I used to carry it on my shoulder. Now it's routinely put on a conveyor and put on top of a roof. So yeah, there's a lot of that. Certainly the technology has come a long, long, long way. And you have to embrace that as well. But that's a good question. Let's start. And then you feel free to ask questions. This is kind of a prime the pump thing. Succession. That's something that we are dealing with in our business. My father died, so it was kind of forced on us. I was the only one in the business in our family, so I became the head of the business. The family owned the stock. They don't want to own the stock in a company like that and not get the dividends that they think they should have. I was pledged at the bank, and I didn't like having 5% of the stock. So it worked out that my wife and I bought the stock. And so we didn't have that to cover. Now I've got 3 sons in the business. 3 sons. 3 people at the trough, or 3 families at the trough, right? And we need to make a successful transition from the 2nd generation to the 3rd generation. That's not all that easy. For instance, in the last 30 years, my wife tells me I've averaged 100 nights of the year on the road, living in hotels. 100 nights. I don't know any other way to do it. The question, are my kids going to be willing to do that? Are their hearts going to beat company blood, and are they going to be willing to do what I had to do to make the company go? I think they will. I hope they do. But that's a great question. That's number 1. Number 2, can they get along well enough to be partners in the business? It's one thing to be brothers in a family. It's another thing to be partners in a business, right? So they've got to kind of cover each other's back. Otherwise, your professional management is going to cut right through them. So they've got to stand as one and cover each other. And then finally, assuming you get number 1 and number 2 right, how are the spouses going to do? Are they going to be supportive of their husbands? So, bottom line, I say to you, it's a high wire act in order to get from the 2nd generation to the 3rd generation. And I think the Richies are having some good experience with that themselves. But I'm committed to that. But interesting, and I just bring it up by way of example, the jury, all 3 are in the business. but the jury's out on whether these three things are going to come together. I won't know for another 5, 6, 7 years. So we are not gifting stock or moving the ownership of the company to them, because if they can't step up and accomplish those three things we've talked about, we're better off selling the business, aren't we? And if you're better off selling the business, then don't start shipping stock to all the families. So kind of an interesting dynamic, which may or may not have any interest to you, but something I've been very involved with.
Do you say you'd be better off selling the business in the interest of all of the employees and people that depend on your company running well?
Absolutely.
Just hand it to your sons to drive.
Yeah.
And along with that is with 3 sons in succession. I mean, I'm sure this is something you're challenged with, but how would you ever try to make it so that the 3 of them would jointly run the company, or would you try to choose one to be a leader?
Well, ultimately the ownership will be divided among all your children, right? So, but one would probably have to run the business, and that's not determined yet. What I say to the family is, the company is the goose that laid the golden egg. Do what you want with the egg, but protect the goose, because there are more golden eggs if you take care of the goose, and the goose is the business. Does that make sense? And so if there's division and that goose is getting threatened, it ain't going to lay any more golden eggs, and you're better off to sell the business when it's up here than subsequently when it goes down.
So did you teach your kids how to run the business? I mean, just kind of...
That's in process.
Well, I mean, I guess, did they have to go to school to get a degree? Or
Yeah. Let me tell you what ours are pretty easy. There are different families have different things. You got to have a university degree, a bachelor's degree. We will be happy to have you go for a master's degree. You have to spend 5 years minimum out in the hinterlands. You start as an outside salesman. You become a branch manager. You have to understand what our customer looks like. Our customer is a little guy who drives a pickup truck. That's our customer. He's not real sophisticated. His books is a checkbook on his dashboard. That's our customer. We love them. We know him by name. When he walks into our warehouse, we call him. We know him. We know who his kids are, who his wife is. We know if when he pulls into our warehouse, if he's got a bass boat on the back of it, we know whether it's our bass boat or his, whether he owes us the money. And he took our money to buy a new bass boat. That's our relationship with our customers. And so all of our children need to spend minimum of 5 years understanding the customer.
I know in some family businesses, maybe in your case, you would have your sons work outside of your company entirely. Is that something that you did?
speak out on questions, okay?
Question was, do you send your kids there are other businesses that are similar to ours, and they will go spend a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks with them and then write up something when they come back. But as far as employment, no, we really haven't done that, and that's something we've talked about, and we've chosen to have them in the company. So, any questions about that? So now you've got the business, and the goal is for my business or your business is to keep that goose healthy and feed it and take care of your professional management. The most important decisions you will make as an owner of a business is who works for you. Those are the most important decisions you'll make. And you have to surround yourself with the very, very best people that you can. Furthermore, if you lose somebody or somebody leaves to go work somewhere else, which happens all the time, then you have a mental process in your mind, I will hire a better person every time than the person I lost. Every time. I will always hire up. As we say in our business, hire friendly, train technical. It's all about our culture. It's what's important to us. It's the caliber of people that we have working for us that makes all the difference in the world. Our customers buy from us because they want to buy from us. Nobody puts a gun to their head and says you have to buy from Lansing. As a matter of fact, anything that we sell in our warehouses typically can be bought cheaper somewhere else. So why do they pay more money to deal with us? It's because of our people. We simply have better people. That's our secret recipe, is people. And I would recommend that to you. A truck driver in our company that delivers building materials sees more of our customers in a day than I see in a week. He has that daily connection with them. Sometimes we don't emphasize how important the greatest is the least, meaning your people, the furthest down the organization structure, typically have more touches with your customer than upper management does. And so the greatest asset you have are the people the furthest down the chain, certainly on the money side. So you have to make sure that they get it. Now, I've handed out mission statement cards, and you might say, well, this is kind of cute, everybody's got one, and that's nice. But this is what our culture is all about. It's important to me that every one of our 600 plus employees now understands that. And so as I travel, and a lot of the travel I do will just be to go from warehouse to warehouse, talking to our people, especially the guy that's sitting on a forklift. And you say to him, how are things going? You ask them an open-ended question, and then you listen very carefully to what they say. For instance, sometimes people, the guy sitting on a forklift, thinks his job is punching a clock. That's all he does. And so he'll say to you when you say, how are things going, that open-ended question, well, it's okay. It's all right. Not too bad. That's a horrible answer. That's a terrible answer. What that tells me as I visit, that they are not clued in to what it is that we're trying to do. We want all our people, whether they sit on a forklift or drive a truck or drive a company car, to understand what we're all about. And that starts with our mission statement. It's our culture. It's what we do, and it's why we do it, and we pound it into everybody's head all the time. Every warehouse that we have has got a big picture of my dad there. Nobody's ever met my father, but that represents the culture of our business, which is so important. So, when I go and I talk to a guy on a forklift and I say the open-ended question, how's it going? And he says, Chris, we're doing really good. Did you see last month's sales? That tells me he gets it, doesn't it? Tells me he's clued in, he's part of the team. Or he might say, don't worry about last month, things are looking really good. Really good. It's okay, don't worry about it. That tells me it's good. And so what I'll do to the guy on the forklift is I say, okay, I got $20 if you can give me the mission statement. And if he can give me the mission statement, he gets 20 bucks. Well, that spreads like wildfire. It's not the words of the mission statement, it's our culture, it's people. It's getting the people all up and down the organization to understand what we're all about. And so to me, the takeaway for you might be, I hope, when you leave here, is it's all about people. at least in my mind, if you were to ask that question. That's the most difficult part of business. It's so easy to hire somebody with a heartbeat or somebody that has a degree from a prestigious place or something like that. It's difficult to hire somebody that you really think gets it. But when you do, you need to protect that person. You need to take care of them. You need to send them notes. You need to absolutely love up on them, as they say in the South, so that he knows that he or she, that they are appreciated. That is enormous in business. Any questions along that line? Golden rule of business. My dad said years ago, had to be a long time ago, he said this: the best thing you can say about a businessman is what? Or a woman? What do you think?
He's honest.
He pays his bills. Pays his bills. So, I hope that's another little acorn for you as you contemplate going into business. You pay your bills first, you pay yourself last. Now, part of the recession that we've gone through as we threw things out of the hot air balloon is I realized that management had to set an example. We laid off a ton of people. We closed warehouses. We imposed a 5% salary cut. We took out the 401k benefit. Tough times. I went off a salary. This is the third year. I'm not on salary. I don't make a nickel out of the business. I'm living on retirement. I don't expect any sympathy from this group. But the point is that you have to do what you have to do. For the first time in my life, I'm not driving a company car. You have to do what you have to do. And so I wanted that to be a statement to the company that I know that you're making sacrifices in behalf of this company. And we appreciate it and we love you for it. I'm going to make a bigger sacrifice than you are because I want you to understand that we're in this with you. So I've been living on savings for this is the third year now. And once again, that's just some of the thing you have to do. You pay your bills, you take care of your people, and then you get what's left.
Were employees blindsided by the downturn, or did you prepare them that this is a cyclical business? You may not be able to keep you forever, keep you in the good times and take care of you, but there might be layoffs someday.
Yes, and we consistently say that. You know, that there are no guarantees. I don't have a guarantee. You know, the bank wants to pull the line, I'm done. Stick a fork in me. So I don't have any guarantees. The people don't. They understand. The good news in our industry is that we've had a lot of competitors go out of business, and they've seen that happen. And we've tried very hard to communicate. I do a quarterly video that we send out, and I send a monthly letter out, and then I try and visit every branch every year. So, and it's no magic. It's just to be there and to fly the flag for our people. It's okay. We're going to make it. We've got the capital. We've had to go on a crash diet, but we're going to make it. And I think that resonates with people because they can read in the newspaper. They see what's going on. They've got family members out of work. They understand. As long as you communicate and you set an example to them and say, you think you're feeling pain, I'm feeling pain too. And I think that they appreciate that. So.
If you were to go out of business, like go bankrupt, like what would you do? Like, would you have an emergency plan or an emergency account that you could rely on?
My emergency plan is to call my friend Jim Ritchie and ask for a job. I would like to think that you always think that, and I think that My wife is probably a lot more concerned about that than I've been, and I think that's just the nature of wives often. But what if? But what if? I said, honey, what if a meteor strikes us? But what if? But what if? And you try to, we had adequate capital compared to most of our competitors. We've come through this very well. We've done all our budgeting, and we're coming out of it. We made a little bit of money last year, so we're feeling better about things. We think we can pick up market share. The market's not going to grow, so the only way to grow is to pick up market share, which is code talk for steal it from your competitor. But we think they're weaker. A lot of our competitors, in our minds, they're dead and they don't know it yet. So we think that we can grow our business there. And
would your strategy currently be to reduce the number of floors or to increase the number of floors?
good question. We have opened 2 this year. Well, we've opened Colorado Springs. We're opening Springfield, Virginia next month. But we've added 25 people on the street, 25 salesmen. We think, that's a great question, we think we can grow our market share, but we got to get our word out. So we're very much investing in people to help us get that market share.
And with that, are you trying to, I guess, kind of with his question, opening more places or take, haul, the loads further to the people?
You do both. You do both. And so a lot of our closings were metropolitan. For instance, we had 2 branches in Minneapolis. We closed 1. We had 2 branches in Philadelphia, and we closed 1. Because of what you say, you leverage your delivery abilities. And as things open up, we will certainly do more than that. I tell our people, and I've told them for 20 years, my goal is 100 warehouses, 500 million in sales. And so they come and they say, well, has it changed now that you're going the other way? No, it hasn't changed. To me, business is like a bicycle. You got to be pedaling it or it's going to fall over. You got to move forward. Things change. This is every business is dynamic. And so you've got to grow in order to stay dynamic. Sometimes you have to go the other way, but it's always changing. Okay? Let's see, what else could I talk to you about? A lot of times I get asked, how do you do, I got all these pressures in my life, I got schoolwork, I've got a new family, I got this and I got that. How do I do what I do? How do I do it? How do you do it? To me, that's the $64 question in life. Those of you that think you're put upon now have no idea. It won't get any better, it'll get worse. I promise you it'll get worse.
How did you come up with this mission statement?
We did that with, we had somebody that we hired a consultant, and we spent, it was 25 years ago, spent a lot of time talking about it.
Is he a church member or?
No.
Did you see inside your principles that you have valued so much?
Ethical, for instance, on there is one that I insisted that we add. The first side is, this defines what we are as a company. We sell exterior building products to professional contractors while maintaining the highest ethical standards. And then the flip side, that's how we do it. Respect, service, excellence. Okay? But that's...
You said you buy your products in bulk. Where do you buy from?
We buy from companies like Alcoa and some roofing companies and other people like that. We typically buy in truckloads and we sell in job lots.
Do they have American-based companies down there?
Not always. Several are Canadian and some are European. Building materials are heavy, right? They're very heavy, so they're expensive to transport. So most of what you see bricks and mortar and lumber and that sort of thing pretty much are domestic because of the cost, both the weight and the bulk of transportation. So, I was just going to give you something a little bit on time management. Think of your life as a stool, a milking stool, 3 legs: church, family, business. You want your stool to be even and balanced. My experience is it's never even and balanced. You're always saying, I got to do a little bit more for my family, or I need to spend more time in school or work, or I need to be doing my church job better. You're never comfortable with it. I think it's because, and this is just a little church analogy, the birds and the animals outside, they don't know what time is. We have a major challenge with time. You do and I do too, because we don't come from an environment where time is as critical as it is now. So we wrestle with it. The important thing is to keep everything in balance. Church, family, and business. You can do it all, but it has to be in balance. Has to be. And you'll never be comfortable. You always have one leg too long or too short. And that's what good spouses are for, is to pull your chain and say, you got a short leg here you need to work on. Usually it's your family. And always they're right. So, what else? What other questions might you have? Okay, you had a question first. Yep.
I read your biography and I see that you mingle with a lot of apostles and prophets. What have you learned from them that you think was something very meaningful to you doing business?
That's great. Let me share with you a story that I learned the difficult way, but I think it has application to all of us. Shortly after I was called as a 70, I was invited to participate in a leadership council, which is where all the stake presidents and stake presidencies and bishops in an area get together to be taught by one or more apostles. So I was invited to participate in something in Taylorsville, Utah, of all places, and the 2 members of the 12 were Elder Packer and Elder Bednar. And so I was invited on Saturday to be part of that. I was brand new. Thankfully, they didn't ask me to do anything, and I got to sit on the stand and be fed. I had the best seat in the house, and to be fed by 2 men that we sustain as apostles and prophets. At the very end, Elder Packer said, President Packer said, we're going to wrap up the meeting now, and what we'll do is all of us on the stand will bear our testimonies, and we'll start at this end, which is me, which implication is the least, right? We'll start at this, and I will Elder Bednar, and then I will finish up, which is typical church procedure, seniority, and we all understand that. So, and then he said, and I would like to ask these brethren to make their testimonies brief. Well, there's a definite statement there when it comes from the president of the 12 apostles, which is, it's implied, people aren't here to listen to your testimony, they're here to listen to our testimonies, so make it brief. You haven't been asked to speak, so don't confuse that with your testimony. Isn't that what he's basically saying? So, I stand up, I've been sitting there all day, and I gave a terrible testimony. It was awful. And I didn't do it, I stammered. Elder Packer's eyes were burning a hole in my back, and I couldn't get off the stand quick enough. I've never been so intimidated in my life. The rest of the brethren bear their testimony. Meeting's over. I drive back to where my wife is. She said, how did it go? I said, it was awful. I did a terrible job. All I had to do was bear my testimony. terrible job. She said, well, people probably weren't listening to your testimony anyway. You're not, couldn't have been like that. And I said, well, I just really blew it. And she said, did anybody say anything? No. She said, don't worry about it. Next morning, the way these things go is Elder Packer was going to one stake and would be speaking with another 70, and I had the assignment to go, Sister Lansing and I, pick up Elder and Sister Bednar and go to that stake conference. So we knock on their door, and I have to tell you, we know the Bednars somewhat because when he was at BYU, Idaho, we knew him before, so we knew him a little bit. At any rate, he welcomes us in the house. He said, we'll be right with you. Sister Bednar will be right here. Elder Lansing, would you come with me? And he put his arm around me and led me into his study. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, what in the world did I do now? And I said, yes, sir. He said, I want to talk to you about yesterday afternoon. Yes, sir. That was a horrible testimony you bore. Yes, sir. I knew it was. I'd already told my wife. There's no sense in complaining about that or refuting it. Yes, sir. He said, it really wasn't very good. I said, I know that. And then he said something that I thought was very important and I will never forget. He said, we didn't ordain you a 70 to have you bear a testimony like that. Tough medicine. He was right on. I took no offense. There's a message there, I think, for all of us that are members of the church. And it has to do with our testimony. He didn't give us a testimony for us not to share it as we're with people. That was a huge takeaway for me. Huge takeaway, and I think there's something in it for you as well. I know we need to keep moving on time. Let me end with just one last story, and it kind of, I hope, ties in the business and the church piece, and it has to do with the dream that I had shortly after my dad died. As I told you, we were in a family business, grew up that way. When I became the president of the company, it was in 1980. That was the worst recession at the time until the one we're in now. Tough times. There were times that I would wonder, situations had come up in work. I was young. What would my dad do? And I think, what would my dad do? What would my dad do with this? And I never felt like I never felt like he was there. And something else would come up, and what would my dad do? How would he handle this? And I don't know. So, and that went on, and I felt very much in my mind that when these situations came up, I never had a feeling in my heart, this is what you do. I always felt emptiness. One night I had a dream. It's just a dream. But in the dream, he comes to me, and I said something to the effect, where have you been? And he said, well, I've been busy. I said, what do you mean you've been busy? I've needed you here. He said, well, you don't understand. They keep us pretty busy over here. And I haven't had time. And I said something to the effect, how can you say that? All the times that we talked about this business around the dinner table, all the times that we worked, all the Saturday nights and early days and late evenings, how can you say that you don't have time for this? And he said, you have to understand, this business really doesn't mean much over here. How can you say that? You say the business doesn't mean much? You weren't so involved with it. How can you say that? Then he said, you need to understand, the important thing is not the business. We don't care in the least about it. What we care about is what you become because of the business. It's a wonderful takeaway. I think it was for me. I hope it is for you, that in life, it's not important what we do, but what we become because of what we do. Does that make sense to you? It is enormous. Now, let me end with my little golf story. I like to play golf. I'm not very good, but I enjoy playing, and I've tinkered around with it all my life. And several years ago, I went to get a lesson, and the golf pro said, well, you need to stand this way, and then you need to grip the club this way, and then you need to do this way. And the more he talked to me, the more confused I got. So instead of going from a hook, which is a right to left sort of trajectory on the ball, I was dribbling it off the tee. I went from bad to worse. And the more he told me, the more I had rattling around in my head. And he finally said this, and it's a thought that I would leave with you. He said, just get your balance and swing hard. Great message. In your life, keep your balance. Keep the legs as even as you can. Be balanced with family and business and church. And once you have that balance, then you can swing just as hard as you want to, and nothing disastrous will happen. But keep your balance. So that's what I would leave my message. Brother Richie, what's the bewitching time? Okay. Oh, I was hoping you'd ask that. The Richies used to be mission presidents in Roanoke, Virginia, and that's how I got to know him. And as we say in Virginia, to know him is to love him. Well, he lived in Roanoke, but most of their mission was east of Roanoke, like in Richmond and in Norfolk. And as a result, they seemed to be traveling all the time. What was it, 250 miles from Roanoke to Norfolk? So they would come by and stay with us at our home in Virginia, because it's kind of the halfway point between Richmond and Norfolk. We had just gotten a new home. We were very proud of it. And so when they were traveling, they said, can we stay with you? And we said, absolutely. We have a guest room that you can stay at. So they came, and they came down to our little guest room. We had a little plaque made. We put on the door of the guest room. It said Richie Suite on it. And my wife put out fresh towels. We were just so excited to have our good friends, the Richies, stay with us. We had set up on our phone, this is back in the mid-1980s, our phone with the police and the rescue squad and the fire department. So they come in about 11 o'clock, and my wife and I go to bed. We welcome them, send them downstairs. We go to bed. Next thing we know, there's sirens. It's the fire department, right? Somebody was calling missionaries at 11:30 at night and called the fire department. The bad part is they went to our neighbors and banged on the door there. The neighbor said, what are you doing? Oh, we got the wrong address. So they came over and banged on ours. Richies came up. We were all embarrassed. We all went back to sleep. A few minutes later, sirens again. Who is it? It's the rescue squad now. They're over there. And finally, number 3, the police came. And that's the only reason that I agreed to come and speak to you today, is I got to tell the Jim Ritchie story about how he alerted half of Richmond, Virginia, with the several strokes of a telephone.
Thank you.
We appreciate you.